Welcome, everyone, to this installment of Counsel's Corner. Talking AI has been a theme and that we will continue to develop in the course of 2025 and centering on our key event in February. In our November 2024 issue of Under the Basswood Tree, I wrote an article on AI and the practice of law, how it actually and potentially impacted the legal profession, including how practitioners in the professional are as a whole will have to consider AI's promise and impact. Today, I want to shift the conversation from AI and how we deliver services and advice to our clients to how AI impacts our clients and services, and counsel will provide them. More specifically, I want to explore AI in the context of corporate governance. Why? Corporate governance is at the very heart of how organizations operate. It is the relationships, contracts, norms, and values that exist among shareholders, the board appointed to run the organization on behalf of the shareholders, and the management that is empowered to execute the board's instructions on a day-to-day basis. Boards and directors individually today face many pressures from multiple sources about how they manage and supervise their organizations. As such, a broader multi-stakeholder approach to governance is required rather than the more basic shareholder-centric approach of the past few decades. In seeking to align with statutory and contractual obligations, and as well alignment with regulatory requirements that apply to them, boards have to be proactive, planning and adopting a holistic strategy towards their various goals and increasing the likelihood of being able to truly create long-term value for their businesses in alignment with the interests of all stakeholders, including shareholders, employees, customers, suppliers, and the community. I have the pleasure of being joined in conversation today with Jeffrey Goddard of Olive Consulting. Jeff is a professional independent director based in the Cayman Islands who has developed a unique advisory business. Coincidentally, Jeff has been putting his mind to AI and the implications to his role and corporate governance in general. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, Haz. Really pleased to be here. I'm looking forward to a vibrant discussion today. I found over the last year plus that AI is a really fascinating area. It's developing so rapidly. It's really easy to go down a rabbit hole. But AI brings with it a huge potential for positive impact on business while also introducing some risks that we need to be aware of. Despite the promises, fears, cautionary tales, AI is not yet a standard agenda for most boards. But I feel it's crucial for boards to move beyond just taking notice to being actively engaged and actually leading as AI finds its way into the business environment. AI has the potential to significantly change the way we do business and the way our people do business as well, and board members would be advised to engage now. However, what we're finding is that many directors are still trying to determine how to start.
Most certainly. I'm sure the audience are in for, and I are in for a treat. Before getting into AI and its implications on corporate governance, please share with our audience a bit about yourself and what you're doing at Olive Consulting.
Certainly, over the past 25 years, I've had the good fortune of working in a number of different technology and business roles. So after starting studies in computer science and graduating, I worked in the technology field as an analyst for a number of years. And then I changed fields and I worked with investments in the investment sector, primarily with large banks such as Goldman Sachs and State Street, both here in Cayman as well as in New York, where I provided services to and managed technology products for private equity and hedge fund asset managers. Personally, I qualified as an accredited director in 2013, and I've worked in governance roles since then, servicing investment managers, investment funds, again, hedge, private equity, real estate, and also companies focused on intellectual property holdings, oil companies, data center owners, and even mining companies. So it's been a great experience for me. In 2014, I co founded Olive Consulting, which provides leadership, development, training, and consulting, and it's the authorized channel partner for the Ken Blanchard companies here in the Cayman Islands. During 2014, I really went down the AI rabbit hole, and Olive Consulting has signed a partnership agreement with a US based AI specialist consultancy call Undesto AI. And that gives us the opportunity to really move further into AI consulting, AI upskilling, focus on AI strategy as well as AI implementations.
And diving right into it, Jeff, one of the first things I do, and thank you for that great introduction and background. One of the first things I do when first engaging with the board on governance, or even as a refresher with the board leading into year-end or evaluation time, is to review the statutory and common law duties. In the US, we use Delaware as our proxy. Um, and generally look at it, directors have two duties, a duty of care and a duty of loyalty. The duty of care is where we tend to spend a lot of time, especially regarding directors' obligations to be informed and or well advised to ensure they have the benefit of the business judgment rule. Now, given the rapid adoption of AI and the broad promises made, it stands out to me that AI should be a topic of board discussion and consideration, if only for the fact that the executive leadership may be committing to substantial spend related to AI or other ways incorporating it into the business operations. How are you seeing it? Is it a topic for boards and a part of their processes? What should a director or board be doing, even if the company isn't a tech company? I know today, you've prepared a presentation to kind of guide us along this conversation. It would be, we'd like to explore those questions and really understand, what should a board be doing? What should be directors thinking about going forward, not as, tech company, but as a board and a management team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there are three main topics that we can consider today as part of the conversation, and
Mm.
I'll get my slides up shortly. But the
Yeah.
three main topics are: is AI on the board agenda? It's important
Mhm.
that it's part of boardroom discussions. The second thing is becoming an informed organization. AI is a new tool that we do need some exposure to, and that may take the shape in different ways. And then the third thing is accepting and asserting leadership and responsibility. It's important that
Mhm.
the board remains actively engaged so that we achieve the promise of AI, but
Mhm.
also manage and mitigate any risks that come along with it.
Certainly, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the that understanding and, really being having it as a topic and having that agenda and a starting place for the board is very important. And I think these topics are probably front and center of a lot of directors about where to start.
Absolutely. Let's start by stating the worst kept secret out there. AI is not a futuristic concept. It's a revolutionary tool that's here now, which can reshape how we operate. We're currently in the process of becoming AI enabled. So, in our personal lives, we have Copilot on our desks, a revised AI powered Siri in our pockets, and AI controlled safety features in our cars. It's now even appearing in the boardroom as we see AI powered note takers or minute takers take effect as various apps, and even some new features are sort of creeping into existing systems that we already use, such as Zoom and Teams. So the fact is, AI is here. We see AI assisted summaries, board papers being presented, and other apps being used by committees as they ideate and come up with initial concepts for the board to consider. The fact is, it's very, very valuable in idea generation and initial concept development. And just turning to some of the stats on the slides that I'm showing here, we can see that 300 plus billion dollars is the expected investment in this area in pursuit of what is estimated to be a 6 to 10% revenue increase for companies that successfully adopt AI. So double-digit percentage growth for revenue is certainly something the board should be paying attention to. The other thing of note is that executive leadership is concerned and paying attention to this area, with 72% of US CEOs regarding AI as a crucial investment area. So the fact of the matter is AI must be on the board's agenda. And if we think about this within the context of corporate governance, that bubble that's highlighted in purple on the screen, AI governance, may not exist at the moment for most boards. In fact, chances are that it doesn't exist. But we do expect this to grow over time. And we know the challenge for most boards is a full agenda, and it's challenging to get anything new put on there. But if boards aren't discussing AI, but we believe that we're currently at an inflection point, not only for business and industry, but society at large, we may be missing something. In fact,
Right.
Deloitte's research released in June 2024 has shown that 41% of organizations feel they're not currently ready for AI. Similarly, Deloitte research published in June 2024 showed that 61% of boards don't have AI on their agenda yet, or they only discuss it once a year. I personally
Hmm.
believe that's not enough. In fact, from these statistics that we can see here, only 14% have AI as a standing agenda item for discussion in every meeting. How does that align with the do nothing approach? Um, it doesn't really align with the values or the fiduciary duties that you've outlined has. So, one of the key questions is what happens if we ignored it? And a do nothing scenario, in my view, doesn't align with the values of well run organizations or a fiduciary's obligations, and has quite rightly outlined some of those duties before. So, doing nothing is a choice, but it actually introduces more risks. And boards and independent non executive directors, in particular, are going to be held to a higher standard due to their professional status. In my view, risks should be identified, mitigated, and actively managed. That is essentially one of the core roles of the board. Otherwise, we miss out on opportunities and we fail to uncover the unknowns and potentially face AI and our data that we're responsible for escaping into the wild. The risk of doing nothing, in my view, is far greater than the risk of taking action. Some of those risks are outlined on the slide here, but if I could just point to a couple, it would be the risk of potentially becoming unable to catch up with your competitors, or the risk of client departures as they seek firms that are more up to date and giving them some of the tools and the way of working that they may be looking for. The other thing that we have to think about is the risk of job losses. And while some people are fearful that AI may replace certain roles, we will also see that our people may choose to leave for firms that are more up to date and incorporating and using AI in their day-to-day work. The last thing that we have to be aware of is that if this is the groundbreaking change that a lot of people are anticipating that it is, there's the potential for us or our strategy to become obsolete. If we think back of certain companies that were stalwarts of industry, Blockbuster, Toys R Us, BlackBerry, Nokia, I don't think I need to say
Right.
more, but the board needs to pay attention.
Yeah. Yeah. They're the caretakers, right? They're the caretakers of the business. They are the managers, and yeah, that risk is their primary function, managing risk.
Slides here. That
And
that's right, Has. So in working with our clients, what we've realized is that there's one glaring reason for the omission from the board agenda, and that's principally the lack of skills. Yet, skill and diligence are two obligations for those serving as fiduciaries. So, when we further look deeper into the Deloitte research, it confirmed that 80% of respondents stated that their boards have limited to no knowledge or experience with AI. And in the execution of our duties as board members, I encourage people to self assess on a continuous basis what skills, tools, and information they need. That effectively tells you or shows you how effective your governance framework will be. So, to fulfill their duties, one of the things that we emphasize is getting someone in to present to the board and put the board on a journey where they can acquire those skills. The Deloitte research that I refer to is showing that 57% of board members are having to independently seek ways to enhance their knowledge, and only 40% of boards are actively being provided foundational education related to AI. Now, at this stage of the AI revolution, many directors and executives will benefit from those foundational skills because becoming current with emerging tools and trends, as well as obligations that the board will be responsible for managing, is the way that they can increase credibility and effectiveness. By providing AI upskilling for boards through training, that's certainly one of the ways Olive Consulting can assist with improving a board's effectiveness. Now, for a board specifically, training and awareness of AI governance frameworks and regulatory obligations is a fundamental requirement. So, our approach is to start with assessments, typically to compile an AI skills inventory so we can assess exactly where the organization is and identify any gaps that may exist. As well as the skills inventory, we compile what we call an AI readiness survey or an AIQ, which looks not only at the people and skills gaps, but the organization's systems and data readiness. These are the essential steps we find that bring the best chance of having the greatest ROI when it comes to AI initiatives.
So Jeff, what I hear you saying is that like any other major undertaking, um, by a company, the organizations needs to maybe slow down first in order to go fast. Understandably, there is hype, and the hype of AI engenders, I think what we call FOMO in an organization, and there's a risk that the board itself is actually and the directors are left behind, and the board is playing catch up to the potentially to the deployment and even adoption of AI within the operations of the business, and ultimately alters the risk profile of the organization. And I think very importantly, which is something that I think we pick up in our guidance and engagement with boards, is that the board has a duty to be informed, but also has the benefit that it can rely on experts and management, but ultimately they are responsible, right? They're accountable and responsible for it. And similar to when an organization is undertaking a major transaction or what we would consider a strategic decision, formal in terms of the strategy in the organization, what I would typically do is I inform the board, via a combination of oral and written briefings, um, and primarily anchored around a memorandum to the board. For example, if they receive an unsolicited acquisition proposal, we tend to detail out the board's duties, um, provide them guidance on how to progress forward while meeting their obligations, whether it's grounded in statutory or case law, and really give them a roadmap to go through it. Um, and I think the approach and the assessment that you've outlined before mirrors that approach, right? I think there's quite a nice symmetry to that. Um, and in the case of AI, I think, which isn't necessarily a legal topic, but as you've laid out, the board has to be dutiful in being deliberate about engaging on AI. Um, and I'm curious, how have you informed yourself as a director, and how do you inform a board that has put AI on the agenda, and brought you in as an advisor? How do you approach that, and how do you get yourself in that next stage after putting it on the agenda?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Has. So there are a couple of things. First, I started spending quite a bit of time on the four pillars of AI readiness. because
Mhm.
really, whenever we're engaging with a client, you have to meet the client where they are. So those the initial time spent on the assessment is really critical. And really what we're looking for are the organization's values and within the context of AI, their knowledge and understanding. And that goes beyond basic AI literacy. We want to evaluate the grasp of AI capabilities as well as limitations and how that differs from existing frameworks they have for managing technology. The other thing we look at is skills and competencies. And we just talked about some of the lack of skill being one of the greatest blockers for progress in this area. So we want to assess practical capability as well as familiarity with tools, how well can they communicate AI concepts, both technical and non-technical. And then we look at data analysis capabilities as well. An important part to this is looking at their mindset and adaptability because success with AI requires more than just technical skills. It requires openness to change, willingness to learn, and the ability to embrace AI. And there are a number of things that we do in that area to help prepare the organization for the
Mm.
implementation of AI. Another important area around the four pillars of readiness is ethical awareness and responsibility. And this
Mhm.
is perhaps the most critical. This is where we really measure the level of understanding of AI ethics, bias awareness, and commitment to responsible AI implementation. These are all essential skills for boards seeking to promote ethical AI development. Um, has one of the things that you touched on earlier
Mm.
was that duty of care obligation that directors have. And of course, this requires being informed.
Mm.
However, what we're seeing is that if AI is not on the board's agenda, it's unlikely that the required reporting is in place.
All
And of
right.
course, that leaves the board exposed. So, one of the things that we work carefully with a board on is to assist them in the selection of an appropriate AI governance framework. And the selected framework will differ from company to company, from industry to industry, and would be informed by the company's values. So it's important for us to spend some time on laying that foundation. Now, once we ensure that the values of the organization are consistently being applied to AI, we can avoid potential conflict in the future. The risks associated with using AI in any organization in the boardroom can absolutely be mitigated, but there must be an effective management or governance framework as well as associated reporting. So the board will want to understand the key risks, the organizational impact, and of course the stakeholder impact. And those are things that we can assist with. Just a couple more points on this.
Yeah.
I think one of the things to remember here is that AI has a unique characteristic is that in that it's an inherent amplifier. If you have a weak foundation and you speed up the rate of progress, you increase productivity and output, you're likely to see things happen more quickly within the organization that might be good or might be bad. So it's important that we spend that initial time assessing business use cases, aligning AI, and also building in AI safety to our approach. So these are all key things. The other thing that we want to make sure that we understand is the obligations that apply to a board, both regulatory and legal.
Mm.
So we want to keep track of the legislative developments and the obligations that the board has to manage. So that again requires active governance. What we see in reality when we speak with clients is there are three different groups. One group, about one third of clients, is blocking AI, locking down systems. Another group, again, about a third, are just experimenting without a real plan. So we call that AI in the wild. And then there's a group that's right in the middle. So now trying to figure out how to approach this responsibly, or they're already well on their way. There are things that the boards need to be aware of, particularly in comprehensive AI uh, legislation, which is now emerging, for example, the EU AI Act. which has an extraterritorial reach with significant penalties for breach. So it's something that we certainly want to keep in mind.
Yeah, and if I understand, as you're saying that, AI is an amplifier of rewards and weaknesses, and the last thing the board wants to be is found lacking or wanting its preparedness for various outcomes. And you have this governance framework that that kind of helps them again be able to get their hands around of it, and begin to go through I guess it's that idea that they have to start somewhere, right? They're starting somewhere. They have a reference to go through that. Um, and if we build out from that framework, what are they looking towards to do? I mean, and where are we looking to kind of go forward, right? Because we've got this framework. Then what comes up for them following that as they get that framework in place?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's why we say at that stage we should talk. So if that initial groundwork has taken place, AI is now on the board agenda. You've considered what skills you need, and you're starting to do training for the board leadership at all levels. um, you really need to start talking to your people. In fact, at the beginning of your AI journey is when we believe you should start bringing people into the conversation. So the board needs to keep in mind that with this new innovation, it's not just a minor tool. We're going to see this become pervasive. It's a very powerful technology that can amplify those positive and negative outcomes, like I mentioned. So that strong foundation, along with persistent leadership, is key. So getting your people on board is really the next step. And of course, naturally, you'll find some people who are advocates of AI, others will be resistors, and yet still others will remain undecided. There's a saying that those who plan the battle rarely battle the plan. So these engagement conversations are a fantastic way to surface concerns and address them with your teams. In fact, at a recent conference, which was TechCrunch Disrupt 2024, AI leaders shared why taking a slow and steady approach is more effective, and it helps avoid harmful outcomes and also builds trust with teams. One of the key questions that can be asked is, can we explain to our own colleagues the value of these AI initiatives that we may be pursuing or that we'd like to pursue? So that's called the explainability test, and it's a really good tool for boards to keep in their pocket and apply as they proceed on this journey.
And I'm guessing there's also this there's always that push to go faster, right? Faster and immediate, as everyone sort of says, feels they're being left behind. The FOMO we're talking about.
That's right. So there's a lot coming up, through the press and in the news, and people may feel like, well, we have to do something, and I think that's why about 1/3 of firms have kind of self-selected into that group of, well, let's just start experimenting, let's just try it, let's just do something. But the reality is that the risks of unregulated, fast paced development or AI deployment is becoming more evident. And in fact, according to Gartner research, 30% of all generative AI projects are currently failing or expected to be abandoned due to poor quality, inadequate risk controls, or escalating costs, or quite frankly, unclear business value. So, this is why we don't believe experimentation in its raw form works. Our observations reveal that companies are loosely experimenting and often lack leadership, which is contributing to that 30% failure rate. Now, at Olive Consulting, we promote a disciplined approach, which is driven by business value creation, and we follow and teach proven models for innovation and change management. So if you look at the graphic on this slide, it's a bit of what we call AI AIO, a little bit here, a little bit over there, but it really lacks structure and a proven approach. The danger with this is that you can have very good ideas, but if they're implemented poorly, the chance of failure is very high. In fact, some research has shown a failure rate of as high as 70% in some areas. So there are a couple of traps that can be avoided. The first trap is AI in the wild, so unmanaged AI experimentation. The second thing is ignoring staff or client concerns,
Mm.
not developing or assessing use cases, so looking for the value in any of your AI initiatives, and not keeping up with competitors. A lot of that can be solved by contracting with or hiring an expert advisor. And again, it's the board's responsibility to put these things in place. These are the guardrails that we refer to in AI, and it's about responsible leadership that the board has to facilitate. As boards of directors, we have that responsibility to shape how AI will be used in our organizations by engaging thoughtfully and recognizing the potential for AI, but the risks as well, and encouraging a slower, safer, methodical approach will end up with a much more balanced outcome and tools that lead to a net benefit in the long run. We
And
promote
it's
proven
that.
models.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
And yeah, no, and I think that's the important, right? That structure for a board to be able to provide the guidance and leadership around it, right? I think that's um the 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 incumbent upon the board to be able to inform themselves accordingly, and really look to say, is this really different from everything else we do, and maybe having a different mindset. And I think that's where having that outside engagement and outside thought leaders and yourselves being brought in to help a board and really say, okay, this is a bit of, it's AI, but maybe it's change management, it's all these things. And I think, that's the benefit of having somebody like yourselves with a board on this journey, right?
That's right, Has, and I can't stress enough the importance of using proven models, right? They give you a framework, they're tried and tested, and for many executives, they contain familiar aspects. So again, you're not starting from scratch. I'd like to share that a number of research papers now in circulation support the position that some of the high failure rates that we previously talked about could be reduced by moving more slowly using proven models. Some of the models that we use that we found to be very helpful in this
Mm.
space really work on mindset. So you more or less have to prepare the field for new seeds, and the new seeds being AI. So we believe and have proven that Blanchard's leading people through change model and also the fearless innovation model have been very, very useful. And again, looking at those key principles of explainability, can we explain to our own colleagues the value being created? Have we identified the business value? AI is just a tool, but we must use that tool to drive value. We need to be value driven, not tool driven. A lot of AI, because it's coming out so fast, could be mismanaged in terms of its implementation. And if we take the approach that we have a solution looking for a problem, that might not be the right approach. There are also those legal, compliance, and ethical concerns that need to be taken into account, and these models do that. For example, the Blanchard Fearless Innovation model emphasizes that innovation shouldn't be siloed. It shouldn't be the exclusive domain of a particular group or department, but pervasive through the entire organization. So that means that the board and executive management have to cultivate that culture, and the models and the training around them help with that. In fact, Blanchard research has also shown that 70% of innovation is ongoing, incremental innovation, not that big bang or rapid change, which actually accounts for about 30%. But it's important to we realize that we all contribute to that and we can all learn how to be more innovative. So the model emphasizes those aspects as well as the business value framework by asking a series of questions. How might we? And if you lead the approach when you're engaging with teams or executives or even in the boardroom, those how might we questions really, really apply in this space and really help us to identify where we can add value. So that approach is much more effective than raw AI experimentation, which many companies, about one third, like I mentioned, are currently engaged in. So at Olive Consulting, we encourage boards to deploy the models, also emphasize building trust. We have a model for that, and also conversational capacity so that we can explain both the technical and non-technical aspects of AI and prepare our people, our client base, as well as our stakeholders for the introduction of AI.
Yeah, and I think what it keeps also triggering for me as well. We return back to this idea of AI as or at least this understanding of AI as an amplifier of rewards and weaknesses, right? It makes very apparent where the organization has strength and where organization has its weaknesses, and it challenges a board for its preparedness around that process. And really, one other area that tends to be very important when we talk about governance and pushing forward is that part of being deliberate and part of being comprehensive is things, is actually having that outward guidance. Is it documented what we're doing? Are we going that way? Because for posterity, we might talk about it, but you know, you need to be able to communicate in the organization. You're managing change. Um, and it seems to us that those, getting it to the rest of the organization becomes very important because all of those things are bound to be amplified. And I think the understanding from your perspective as both as a board member, but also as an expert in the area, what else are you trying to make sure boards really also embrace around all of this process?
Yeah, has I think you're hitting the
Mhm.
nail on the head.
Yeah.
Experienced board members are familiar with the saying that if it isn't documented, it wasn't discussed. So it's important that we not only have those discussions in the boardroom, but actually get things down on paper, right? That's what's going to hold up in challenging situations or when we realize things aren't going according to plan, you can go back and review those documents. So it's about putting those guardrails in place and making sure they're documented. We've become more familiar with a model called the magic triangle, and that's used in decision making and managing risks. It starts with business value, like I spoke about earlier. AI is a tool, we have to be value driven, also taking into consideration our obligations, legal, compliance, and ethical. But also, it's important in the world of AI that we not only engage with the tools, which are largely being released in the generative AI space, but also we have to be iterative. We have to realize that there are a number of validation steps that we have to put in place when we start to introduce the new technology, and we have to test and retest and retest. And some of the things that we need to gauge the results against are our values and assess whether the guardrails that we have put in place are effective. That's really, really, really critical. So we have the AI governance, we have the data governance, but there are also other concerns such as copyright infringement, monitoring the impact of systems once they've been introduced. That's all really, really critical. And that oversight from the board in terms of any policies that need to be developed around that space is absolutely essential. Again, the board is the steward of the organization's reputation, and that's measured often through brand value. So we also have a responsibility to our clients and our people and other external stakeholders as well. And we have to ensure that the board's efforts are positively contributing and they're documented. So that would be my advice as you go through this roadmap of AI experimentation and implementation, those constant checkpoints, those assessments to make sure that
Mm.
your framework, your governance, and your guardrails are effective.
Yeah. And I think it's also an important part of, when we talk about business judgment rule and protection is that, you can demonstrate, what was your mindset and what were your rationale, what were you measuring against, and having that documentation, that reference to values becomes very important for saying, this is where the board and this is the rationale the board was being directed by. And I think it is very aptly, who is leading and how is leadership established, and the responsibilities, which again triggers its own kind of next things. Okay, we've got these things documented with the like, who's going to implement and who's going to lead, especially, and where's the responsibility put forward to the organization.
That's right, Has. So that brings us on to leadership. Um, and it's important that the board lead AI and any implementation thereof and not be led by AI. We know there's all this uh, information coming out, new tools coming out, but leadership always influences or determines the outcome. Not some of the time, but all of the time. So, what are some of the steps that boards can do in this area? Um, After taking some of the initial steps that we talked about, ensuring AI is on the board agenda and so on, it's really important to delegate AI initiatives formally to a committee, a steering group, or if you're a smaller company, an AI champion, someone that's going to help navigate the introduction of AI in the organization. For larger companies, one thing that we're seeing emerge is a new position at the executive level called a Chief Artificial Intelligence Officer. And according to Forrester Research, 12% of companies with a solid AI strategy now already have a Chief AI Officer. About 2% have assigned that responsibility to an existing position, such as a Chief Data Officer or Chief Privacy Officer. But additional research by a firm called West Monroe, which is a business and technology consulting firm, has indicated that 40% of large firms are expected to appoint a chief AI officer in 2025. Now, that might not be suitable for every company, but perhaps a steering group or an AI committee of the board might be the way to go. So those
Mm.
are some of the things that we consider when dealing with clients, and we believe clients should consider as well. Now, the good news is many well-run organizations already have a number of tools in place or policies or related procedures that can help with the deployment of AI. One of the things that we recommend the board commission is a policy document review and updated training. Some of those key policies that may already be in place, if you're certainly if you're regulated or if you're well run, your employee code of conduct, there may be aspects of that that need to be updated to accommodate AI. Your acceptable use policy, that might be due for a rewrite or an enhancement. Your business risk self-assessment document. AI does bring with it new risks that need to be incorporated. Of course, your ongoing training, like cybersecurity awareness, your IT department's software selection process, those are all things that should be looked at through the lens of AI to make sure that the organization is ready and protected.
Yeah. And ultimately, I think, the board is there to deliver results for the organization, and governance is about how they steer the ship to commercial outcomes. I think, having that perspective is always important. In your view, practically, what kind of operational and implementation opportunities and risks are the board trying to prepare their organization for and steering around when we think about, this context? Um, you know, really trying to really again understand that, how do they, what are they, yeah, preparing for, and what are they steering around?
Yeah. So where we see most of the effort is around preparing the organization's people. So, and then the second set of efforts would be around the organization's data. But if I could just focus on the people, because I really think that is critical. And of course, that's the area that I spend more time with. Um, Simple efforts or initiatives like staff attitude surveys towards AI readiness can give you a quick snapshot of where your organization is in terms of its people and what they think AI can be applied to. Um, I think organizations will certainly benefit from appointing a consultant or developing or hiring qualified in-house staff to help with any AI journey that they may be on. In fact, Blanchard's own research around change management shows that most organizations start communicating to their teams too late in the
Mhm.
process. So it's really important, and a key part of this process is to communicate your intentions to people and allow them to engage in the process, to raise any concerns they have, for you to capture information that they may have, but it may have not been communicated or considered at the board level. You really want to root out any blockers or
Mhm.
issues that are relevant to leadership, operations, organizational change, as well as look at the key functions that could benefit from AI support. And those conversations will help you identify them. You should also then look at commissioning particular groups to work on identifying specific tasks that can benefit from the implementation of AI. So essentially maintaining this dialogue throughout the process, both within the organization and within the boardroom, really helps keep the process moving. Um, at the same time, the board needs to receive briefings on existing and emerging AI solutions, as well as updates on the ongoing efforts around fostering trust, testing tools, looking at business cases. And the goal there is really to ensure that the best return on investment is achieved.
Jeff, it's been a pleasure, and I know we can go on with such a rich topic we have at hand. And I'm sure there are fellow directors, executives, they're obviously looking to accelerate um, AI into their organizations. And those of us advising boards who have found the issue you raised relevant or articulating the challenge they've been wrestling with. Um, we've only kind of touched the surface here today. How, for the benefit of our audience, how can we get these people, the directors, executives, advisors, how do they get to learn more or get in touch with you about this navigating AI?
Yeah, thank you, Haz. It's really been a pleasure to be here today. I've enjoyed the conversation, and even in preparing for this,
Right,
it's been thought-provoking.
right.
AI is a worthy challenge for board members. They have to pay attention. And I really hope that the discussion today assists them with fulfilling their fiduciary duties. And I hope that it leads to meaningful conversations for board advisors, as well as management teams. So my challenge or my call to action in terms of what boards can do now if they're feeling stuck or facing challenges, or perhaps they've started and just want to verify their approach. First, consider consulting a professional. It'll help speed the process. Number two, communicate with your people early. Define a clear AI strategy, get your guidelines in place, get it on the board agenda, provide AI training for the board and employees. That skills gap is the number one blocker at the moment. And of course, adopt an appropriate AI governance framework and then delegate responsibility for AI to either a steering group, a committee, or an AI champion. The final steps would be understanding and mitigating risks as you pursue the potential benefits of AI. It's important that we keep that balance in place. And then, of course, start experimenting but following a proven model so that you can implement tools that make sense for your business and create value. Again, we're after that net benefit. If I could just sum up, understanding how to responsibly implement relevant AI in your organization while effectively maintaining high levels of trust, risk management, and value creation, that's the key. That's what we should be aiming for. So if there's any way that we can help with that, I encourage people to reach out to us either through our website or through LinkedIn. We'd be happy to engage in a conversation and see how we can assist.
Oh, thank you so much, Jeff. I know that, at the beginning of the year, as we talk with boards and management, I certainly have a better, I think, ability to, again, just get it on the agenda. Let's start there if we haven't had the discussion, and then bring in the experts to help us navigate the part. But we really start out at let's get it on the agenda, let's talk and get it forward. Thank you again so much, Jeff. It's been a pleasure having you here. And thank you for everyone for joining us. And we look forward to continuing the conversation.